The whole idea of the spiritual path being a battle isn't well accepted in some circles. I remember some years ago, my wife, Swami Diksha, and I were teaching a course on the Bhagavad Gita, and I brought this question up to the whole classroom. What do you think? Many people say that this idea of the spiritual path being a battle, very politically incorrect. It just isn't. And so I said, what do you all think about that? One fellow raised his hand and he said, I've been in recovery for 20 years. It's a war. And that was the end of the discussion because there's really nothing more to say. Well, we're all in recovery. Right? We're in recovery from seeking our happiness outside of ourselves. And some of us have been in recovery for lifetimes, some of us for years, some of us are just starting out, but we're all in recovery. And it's really important to keep in mind that a couple things. One of them, you're not alone. That's why events like this are so important, even for people who live in one of the Ananda communities. It's so important to come together. And so far this week, in this class today, we've been talking about what we're going to fight this battle with. And we had attitudes yesterday, and the body today, the mind today. But the mind can be thought of as in a couple of different components. If you want to talk about its broadest level, there's the intellectual mind, but there's also the heart. And that's what I want to address mainly, perhaps in a little different way than you might be expecting. The heart is a very interesting feature of the human being because, on the one hand, the heart chakra I'm talking about, not the physical heart. On the one hand, it is the center of intuition. This is how we're going to know who we really are, how we're going to know God, with the heart. It's the center of devotion, what's going to take us there. But it's the center of emotion, attachment, desires, the very things that block intuition, that distract our devotion. It's really sort of a Jekyll and Hyde place, the heart. Personally, I think it's a major design flaw in the human being, one that would embarrass even the Boeing company. But here we are. And what I'd like to do is talk a little bit about dealing with emotion as a stand-in for emotion, attachment, desire, all that stuff. They're all kind of in the same ballpark. What can we do about that? Not to stuff emotion. We all know that doesn't work. But how can we de-energize it? Because all of us have these days when we are energizing our emotions, when we're giving in to them. We might not do it outwardly, but you know what's going on inside of you. And we all have them. What to do about them? One approach, which I'm not going to take, because it often doesn't work, is the face-to-face, soldier-to-soldier battle. Once Master was giving a talk, and a couple of ladies got up in the talk and started to walk out. And he said, "Sit down. You're never going to hear another lecture like this in your life. Sit down." They sat. And you'd like to say that to an emotion, like, shut up. You're never going to find God this way. Shut up. But it doesn't always work. And why doesn't that work? Because something Master also said, he said, reason follows feeling. Now, wherever you feel about something, the mind is going to follow along with it and justify it. You find yourself with a negative emotion and you want to get out, and the mind will say, "But you saw what happened. It's natural to feel this way. And you find yourself with a positive but outward emotion, and the mind says, oh, come on, the spiritual path is really hard. Just let me enjoy this for a little while. So the mind is already infected. There are different approaches we can take. Instead of a face-to-face confrontation, we can do a sneak attack. And I'd like to offer 3 different kinds of sneak attacks that we can do on these feelings that can just overtake us. First one, sneak up from behind. Now, what do I mean by that? As human beings, we have sort of 3 levels of who we are. There's the mind level, there's the energy, prana level, the body level. As we all know, whatever you're feeling in the mind has an effect on how the energy is flowing in the body, which in turn has an effect on how the body actually behaves, how it sits, how it stands, how it moves. And this is something that is natural to all of us, but one of the most beautiful discoveries I ever heard of, yet it's so simple to us now in this day and age that we don't always think about it, unless we're practicing Ananda Yoga, is that the direction of influence goes in the other way. Also, that the body has an effect on what's happening with the energy in the body. And what's happening with the energy in the body has an effect on the mind. So if the mind is too slippery for us, which it often is, often it's like trying to pick up a handful of water, we need to work at a more elementary level. Come at it with the energy, if we can work with energy, but even the body, if that's all we can grasp at that time. And I'd like to just share a little example with you, which almost all will be familiar with, but it's interesting to have a look at it from this perspective. Every time we breathe, every time we inhale, energy goes up the spine, which anybody can feel it if they pay attention to it for just one breath. Every time you exhale, energy goes down the spine. But bringing that 3rd level in, every time we're happy about something, upbeat about something, energy goes up the spine and we inhale. And when we're down, energy goes down, we exhale. And if we're more prone to the positive, say, then the rising energy and the dominant inhalations are going to be the main feature of our breathing. We'll still exhale, energy still will go down, but the main feature will be the rising, and vice versa for the negative. So I'd like to invite you to bring to mind an emotion. Maybe it's an emotion of today. Maybe it's a habitual emotion over a long period of time. And if you can't think of any emotion, which is quite possible given the environment we're in here, just remember the last time you looked at the news. Close your eyes. And keeping that emotional reaction in mind, try to get a sense of how it impacts your energy, if you can feel it, energy in the spine, if you can feel that. But if not that, then at least the physical inhalations and exhalations. And see what's dominant. If the inhalations are stronger than the exhalations, or the opposite. Just tune into it. Master said that the most important quality for happiness is even-mindedness. And even-mindedness in this context translates into equal inhalations and exhalations, equal rising energy and descending energy. And how do we do that? with what he said is the most important human faculty, willpower. The reasoning mind can be hijacked by emotion, but you always have the will. The will is always available to you if you choose to use it, and all we need to do is use the will to equalize either the physical breaths or the astral breaths, the movements of energy, and we let the air out of the balloon of emotion. It might take one breath to do this. It might take an hour and a half of doing this, depending on the strength of the emotion. But it's a beautiful way that we can sneak up from behind the emotion and take ourselves into a better space. So let's open the eyes once again. That's the first sneak strategy. The second sneak strategy is come at the emotion from the side. Now, what do I mean by that? I mean, sort of come up close and in a way that the emotion's not going to notice you. All right? That you think that you want to do something about it. It's just going to say, okay? Now, what's that? Emotions are inherent to ego consciousness. You have no ego, you have no emotions. Doesn't mean you have no feeling, but you have no emotions. Because you don't mind whatever happens. So what if we have this emotion brewing over here, but over here we look at the sort of the capital city of emotion, ego consciousness itself, and think, if I could just make that universe over here a little bigger, expand not the ego, but expand my sense of who I am. I think, and you'd be right if you thought that, I think that this emotion over here is going to get de-energized. So, how do we do that? Well, fortunately, there are some really simple things we can do. And this is where we come to a quality of practice that I've found to be probably the most fruitful, simple, effective practice on an everyday level since I've been involved with Ananda, and that's the practice of expansion. Expansion versus contraction. We talk about this a lot, but it's really helpful to understand it on the most visceral level because it's not just philosophy. It's something we can feel. For example, think of a time when you could have done something for someone, should have done something for someone, and didn't do something for someone. How does it feel? Very small. And where does it feel small? Right in the heart. On the other hand, suppose that never happened, that you had this opportunity to help someone. It was a nasty thing that had to be done to help them. It was very unpleasant, perhaps very painful, and you did it anyway. How's that feel? Expansion, right here. It's such a simple thing. But how often do we miss our opportunities to practice it? How can we practice it? Where can we practice it? Well, I can guarantee you it was being practiced in pretty much everybody in this room last night in this room during that incredible concert. Thank you, musicians. It was so beautiful. You have a combination of that glorious music and satsang simultaneous. I mean, I guarantee you anybody came here last night with an emotion, which I doubt because we're already a couple days into the week, but it could have happened. I guarantee you didn't leave with it. What you left with was that shriveled emotion over here being totally deflated an expanded sense of who you are. And the beautiful thing is there are a lot of ways that we can practice this. One way, very interesting, most of you know Dr. Peter, who is the physician here in the community who started the local clinic and still leads it. And some years ago, he and I wrote a couple of books on yoga therapy for headaches and yoga therapy for insomnia. And we were going to do a third book, yoga therapy for depression, which we never did, which is not depressing anyway. But we never did. He's such a busy guy that it just didn't happen. But as we started to talk about it, one of the first things he said to me, he knows a lot about depression because, unfortunately, a very large percentage of his patients have depression, whether a habitual attitudinal depression or actual clinical depression, where the brain keeps depression going for you, emotions or not. And as I say, working with these people over the years, he said the very first thing we need to keep in mind with this book is the most important thing anyone can do for depression, whether it's attitudinal, fleeting, or clinical. Said the most important thing anyone can do, even in some ways more important than the medications, if they need medications, service to other people. Said because that illness itself has this insidious power to make you totally self-enclosed in a cocoon of self-concern, and that there's nothing that will bust you out of that like deliberate, willing, energetic service to other people. Very beautiful thought. It's just another way to forget the depression itself. Forget it. Just do the service. The effect still happens. And even if they still need medications, you think of the medication as opening the door, but service is a way to walk out the door into a larger reality. You know, the people, and we all know these people, just living here in Ananda Village, I have the opportunity to know a lot of people who are very, very good at expansion. It is the most versatile, powerful, portable, happiness-making thing I practice, and it's free. It's free. Don't even need to go to the gym. Life is the gym. You get a chance to practice it all the time. And as I say, there are other ways to expand that sense of who you are without even dealing directly with the emotion. I don't mean you should just ignore it, but it's conscious ignore it, putting it on the back burner while you work on something much more important. So that's the sneaking in from the side approach. One more. That's the most fun one. Sneaking up from above. And this is one that can work for any emotion. But there are some emotions where it might just be the only thing that can work for. Just to give you an example, some time ago I was counseling with someone, a woman who had grown children, and she had given them everything, not in the sense of spoiling them, just utter love and care their whole lives. They had grown up, they were successful in life, so-called successful in life, and they hated each other. And it was tearing her apart. She had given everything to those children, and they weren't angry at her, they loved her. They were angry with each other, and she couldn't just calm the heart. She couldn't just control the flows of energy in the spine. She couldn't sneak up on it, on that attachment she was feeling that was torturing her. She couldn't sneak up from the side because her heart had been hijacked by the situation. She tried affirmation and lots of things. She was very, very sincere devotee. But she just couldn't let go. She had her last resort was something that Swami would say often. And in the beginning, I could not understand this. He would say, give it to Divine Mother. And I would say, yeah, but how? I mean, it's so insubstantial, and she's insubstantial or infinitely substantial, or I don't even know whether she exists for sure. You know, I hope so, I believe it. I'm dedicating my life to it, but it's so, how can you make it tangible? And you make it tangible at the level of feeling. You don't make it tangible at the level of doing. And Jaya explained yesterday how to do that. Very simple. You put out the best energy you can, the most energy you can, in the best direction you can think of, and say, God, help. You got to guide me. I'm going to work as hard as I can to help this move forward, but there's only so much I can do. You have to help. So it's not just being open to the help, not even inviting the help. It's magnetically drawing that help. That's the sneaking up from above technique. And this is something that pervades the Mahabharata. If there's one theme in the whole Mahabharata, yes, Dharma, okay, but really it's God's grace that pervades the whole Mahabharata, that you see it time after time after time. And I wanted to end with just painting a very brief picture of the end of the war. What has just happened is the final conflict has happened between two people, Bhima, fourth of the Pandavas, the second oldest, I should say, heart chakra, and Duryodhana, king material desire, as Master called him. And they had had a mace combat, mace being a huge, heavy club that only the strongest of warriors could really be that effective with. And they had been fighting this duel, and it had become clear that Bhima, who had tremendous strength, was not going to win. Duryodhana, who had tremendous skill, was going to win. And Krishna suggested to Arjuna that Arjuna remind Bhima of a vow he had made many years ago that he was going to break Duryodhana's thigh. So Bhima, I got it. He remembered. He was beaten to a pulp, but he remembered. And he attacked Duryodhana, who leapt aside to avoid the expected blow, because as we all know, the only honorable place to strike another person is at the navel or above, never below the navel. But Bhima did the unexpected, and he hit Duryodhana's legs and broke both his thighs. And Duryodhana just crumpled to the earth in howling with agony, howling with outrage also that anybody could do that. The Pandavas gathered around him. This was a real moment, a moment to savor. They gathered around him, and slowly Duryodhana, with just his hands and arms, pushed his upper body up off the earth. He said, Krishna, do you think I did not see you suggest to Bhima this unholy act? Have you no shame? You have caused so many warriors to fall by unfair means. And he proceeded to list how Krishna led to Bhishma's fall, led to the role of ego. He led to Drona's fall, habit, to Karna's fall, attachment. And he said, Duryodhana said, if you had fought fairly, you never would have won. Hearing that, the celestials had all been watching this from up there, just dropped a shower of fragrant flower petals on Duryodhana. And they sang out, praise be to King Duryodhana. Bhishma, Drona, and Karna were indeed slain by unrighteous means. Isn't that what you want to hear at that point in the story? and the Pandavas were just like, oh. And they all hung their heads in shame. And Krishna said to them, listen to me. Those are great warriors. Bhishma, Drona, Karna, Duryodhana were great warriors. Even with all your prowess, you never could have defeated them in fair fight. If I had not used my divine powers to assist you, victory would never have been yours, nor kingdom, nor wealth. He said, do not feel bad about this. When one is greatly outnumbered by his foes, he must triumph by any means possible. We have fought hard, and success is ours. Let us return to camp and rest. And so it is with us. Again, to me, the story of the Mahabharata is God's grace coming here, there, everywhere, in ways that you don't always see, that doesn't get said, this was grace, this was grace. It just happens. Krishna intervenes. Other saints intervene. This is the sneaking up from above. And this is the one that really has the power not just to take us out of emotion, but to take us from freedom to freedom. And it's the only power that will take us to freedom. And it will. God bless.